Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. If you're new to the channel, please hit like, subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit that notification bell so you're alerted whenever we go live, as we're constantly adding new shows. We're doing live streams with other channels, so you have to be alerted. I hate when we do a show and someone goes, "Oh, I didn't know." Hit the bell. Allegedly, the bell is supposed to alert you. If you're listening on an audio-only format, make sure you hit whatever subscribe button you have to hit so you get all these episodes when they're hot and fresh. Also, before we start, I want to remind people that my work is finally being published. My essay, I Was a Teenage Anarchist, will be available next month in print from Everyday Analysis. Talks have intensified about a live show. We actually have a date. I messed up. Didn't have the flyer ready to give to Toussaint to put on air. But we'll start sharing it around. November 18th is the date. Be reading a little bit from the book. Gonna have a panel discussion with a bunch of heavy metal and punk rock legends. So I'm pretty stoked about that. And it's all going to be in a semi-secret location. November 18th in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm so excited for that. I promise we'll share the flyer the next time we're on air Tuesday. Someone says, Toussaint, you put that on the screen too. Someone says, wow, Jason's showing off one of his purple label shirts. I was trying to be more adult and I bought all these used shirts that happen to be polo shirts. And in the champagne room, I will tell you the story of why I'm traumatized by polo shirts. This is helping me overcome my polo trauma. It's a funny story. If you guys enjoy it. That being said, let me bring in the faceless voice of reason who put this show together. Please welcome MToussaint.
Hello. Good to be on air with you again. Good to have the soundboard back.
Everything. You've been on air with me since we've been back in this new setup, have you?
I have, for sure. But
it's been a while.
It's very obvious that there's no soundboard sometimes.
Right? When you're not with me, you feel my absence. Just admit it.
I do.
Right? You people miss it a little bit, don't you? As much as you guys complain, you miss it just this much. I'm happy to be back. I don't know how long I'll be back, as my life is a bit of I don't know what it is. But there's a lot going on that's keeping me off air. But coming up, we have two big holidays that you wanted to discuss. What made you, let me ask you the question. I'll put you on Front Street, MToussaint. What made you say, hey, we have to do some shows at TIR? Jason says, MToussaint booked the shows. And what made you say, let's do a whole show on Columbus?
It's because I'm a child.
28. You're 28.
At 28, I'm a child. I'm very in touch with my childhood and school, when we used to have holidays and do things for holidays. We had different themes. Mm-hmm. So when I was setting up the calendar, I was like, hey, maybe we should do a Columbus show. And I was like, hey, there's that John Graham guy. He's pretty great on this stuff. Let's rope him into our shenanigans and see what we can do.
John Graham should also be known as the man that made us take the chat off the screen for the main show.
Is that right?
John Graham was on the show. I want to say it was his first appearance on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And he had actually wrote some interesting stuff on the 1776 project. And we were talking about the 1619 project and the 1776 project. And I don't even think we'd even mentioned 1619. And that's when we first got hit with our first troll. And just to let you guys know how much this show has grown, you get Facebook memories. And Facebook reminded me that only 2 years ago, we had just hit 100,000 downloads for the audio only podcast. We are about 22,000 away from 1 million downloads.
That's amazing.
Right? That's crazy. So thank you guys for listening to the show. The little show that could.
Quick super chat. Prairie Fire Kowalski says the Columbian Exchange got us potatoes. Worth it.
Okay. Dead Whiskey says PragerU told me Columbus was a pretty chill guy.
PragerU has their whole thing on Columbus being.
What state is that? Is it Florida? That's like we're going to allow PragerU to be used in academia.
Unreal.
Can you imagine the kid that? First of all, when a kid says they go have homeschooling, I always look at him with a side eye.
Yes.
Right, and I shouldn't. That's really crappy of me, but I'm a dick. So I'm going to do that. It's not like the public school system of Richmond, California did that much for me, but still. It's like if I had that level of control over my child, the things they would learn and the things they wouldn't learn.
Exactly.
Right? Like my kid probably couldn't find Russia on a map, but they would know John Elway is the greatest quarterback of all time.
They couldn't figure out what was the water on a map and what was land. Doesn't matter.
But they know all the words to hit them up.
There you go. Priorities.
That's my school. I don't know if I can get a charter for that, but that would be my version of Prager. Like I know if I imagine if Phoenix, my lovely son, who I'm gonna be able to see tomorrow, nice. My lovely son, had to deal with a class full of me, you, Jean Bajlan, Pascal Robert, and Deep State Koopa.
Oh boy.
Oh my God, that poor kid. That poor kid. Like it's bad enough he has to deal with me after he comes back from school.
Mm-hmm.
And he's 5.
Yeah.
So whatever he's learning about Columbus Day now, when I see him, if I don't hear the right narrative, I'm just going to go off on him.
Son, I don't know where you got that narrative from. Dad, what's a narrative?
Don't you come at me, you little son of a gun. This coming Monday, the day this episode will hit all of our audio only formats, marks 2 big holidays in the US and Canada: Columbus Day in the United States and Thanksgiving in Canada. I did not know they strategically had them on the same day. Did you know that?
Not until this year.
I thank you. I learned that from you, Toussaint, because we had to do research for the show.
Right.
Many of us from my generation were taught an origin story of the holiday that consisted of brilliant men sailing across seas to discover a new land, then on that land encountering peaceful natives, and in this new world they shared a meal to celebrate the end of their harvest. Excuse me. That story, of course, wasn't the truth and enabled young people to have a false sense of national identity, as this narrative obfuscates the terror inflicted on Native people and also allows one to believe that a land was discovered with people already living there. With advancements in ethnic studies and more acceptance of acknowledging the atrocities of settler colonialism by having days of remembrance and land acknowledgements, is this enough to redress the harm? Is it enough to change the name to Indigenous Peoples Day? What more can be done? Well, we have Native American scholar, historian extraordinaire, our good friend, the John Graham.
Notice I'm wearing the People's T-shirt, unlike some selling.
How are you, John?
I'm doing well.
And are you from Texas?
Originally from Texas. Yep, lived in Missouri about 8 years now, but I come from the great state of Texas.
And you're a Cowboys fan?
I'm morally obligated by the sins of my ancestors to cheer for the Cowboys. It's a sort of fatalism I've adopted here as a history educator in this time.
Well, John, thank you once again for joining us. And I did have to bring up the fact that you are literally the reason why we had to take Chad off the screen.
It's true. That was a fascinating entry into the world of This Is Revolution. Yeah. Appropriate, turns out, but still interesting.
Do you want to read that super chat, Toussaint?
Sure. Another one from Prairie Fire Kowalski. New World horticulture was more advanced tech, to be honest.
Ooh, we're going there already. Now, John, I have one quick question for you. First question. How has the narrative of Thanksgiving and Columbus's discovery of the New World changed in just like the primary levels of education? Because I know you wrote a book that we talked about, was it last year or earlier this year, about education and Native studies?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I would say that we are still at the point at the K through 12 level where we're introducing new perspectives without actually challenging the central narrative effectively. Right. So, you might do a unit on the Wampanoag, which are Squantos tribe, right? And so, Thanksgiving is still happening, but there were Native Americans there, and here's what they thought, as opposed to actually challenging the underlying narrative, right? So that I think that still remains, still work to be done. But this is kind of across U.S. history, right? I mean, we still tell the American Revolution with the same narrative. We just mentioned that Crispus Attucks was there now. Look, we put a black man. We're multicultural. We did it, right? I don't think we're doing any better with Native American history.
Wait. When you said the Crispus Attucks thing, so it's still like the same revolution story, but then the teacher goes, "Fun fact, colored guy."
He kind of started it.
Who There's a chick named Phyllis Wheatley, and we'll read some of her stuff, and I'm also confused by it, but it's fine. Yeah. So I mean,
you are a parent of. Are your kids in primary school?
Yeah, I've got one in 6th, and I've got one in 3rd.
So do the teachers hate you because you're like, honey, no. I can't. I can't with a good conscience. I can't.
I try to support by supplementing. That's kind of how I see it. I mean, I'd rather have public schools that are trying to do the right thing, sort of half-assing it, right? Than nothing, right? Because I'm in part of the country where school boards are still being threatened by crazy people. So I'd rather have a sort of a weird California white progressive, in the classroom than a fascist. So I just kind of support the progressives the best I can.
Oof.
That's kind of the cynicism where I am right now, but
Oof. We are going to get into some of that in the champagne room.
Let's do it.
One of the things that we have is a progressive white female rapper that I think. Did you watch that one video, Toussaint?
No, I didn't watch that one.
Oh my God, there's so much fun for us in the champagne room, but that's later. Toussaint, you have a question for Mr. Graham, Dr. Graham.
Dr. Graham. 1 second.
Here, I'll read it since you're moving too slow.
It's number 1.
2.
Okay. I read Columbus's diary in high school. We were promised a more nuanced and positive look at the man. I remember him not doing anything to stop his men's savagery and lamenting over the effect of his trips to the Caribbean, which is not exactly a positive portrayal of him. What else can you tell us about how he dealt with the effects he set into motion on the Indigenous peoples?
Yeah, so That's a really good question. Part of Columbus's legacy is the fact that there's a lot at stake, even in how his contemporaries see him, because Ferdinand and Isabella give him like crazy legal rights in the New World if he actually managed to pull this off, finding Asia, right? So he gets these crazy rights. So because of that, he becomes a very arrogant, not only towards Native Americans and the Caribbeans, but he also becomes incredibly arrogant towards the Spaniards under his governorship. And because he also has so much power all of a sudden in the court, there's a lot of intrigue at every level trying to also demonize the man. So you have people trying to demonize him and get him sent back in chains, and he basically gives them all the evidence justification they would need. He's a terribly violent, arrogant man to everyone under his power. He's not a great dude, right? And there's more than a few people willing to help destroy him to take some of his power and prestige at the court.
Wow.
Why do you think so you're saying that a big reason for this is because you know they had to protect kind of their legacy, but here we are how many hundreds of years later.
Yeah.
You know, why still do we, and I know isn't it called Indigenous Peoples Day now? I don't live
It is.
Yeah, Biden passed that, I think, last year, 2 years ago.
And is it still a federal holiday? Like banks are closed and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Are we allowed to look at him now as a flawed individual?
Well, I think we have to, right? Because not just because of who he is as a person, right? But what his legacy is used to justify, right? So we're talking about a guy who never once stepped foot on mainland North America, and yet his name is enshrined not only in the Capitol, but in a bunch of other cities and places and statues around the nation. It's because not just the way he did, it's because of what he can stand for. Right? He can represent a certain narrative embedded in the doctrine of discovery, right? That superior Europeans found a land that was either empty or largely empty and made it worth something, right? That they brought technology, they brought civilization, they brought history. And then if that's what he did, then the inevitable legacy of Columbus is the United States, right? We are the latest, greatest chapter of Western civilization. We are the obvious fated end of the story that he begins. And so because of that, I think we have to be especially brutally honest about him, because it's not just about whether this one man should be vilified or praised. It's about whether an entire project, a very dangerous project, can be toppled or not, if that makes sense.
Well, then how do we begin to decouple that narrative? Because it seems like it's just so ingrained in, like you said, K through 12 education. We're starting to add little nuances to the narrative.
Sure.
How do you even begin, especially when you have people on school boards who also grew up with the same narrative, who probably also have like a vested interest in their own national identity? There was a huge pushback from Italian people to not get rid of certain streets. We have, Columbus streets in places like San Francisco.
Yeah.
So, how do we even break through that without people feeling as if it's an attack on their heritage, if you will?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? It's a very pragmatic one in the end, because in a general sense, the real problem is that bad history meets psychological and emotional needs that good history can't. Right? So head up, one, good history versus bad history. Good history is pretty much always going to lose in sort of the popular mind. And so I think what we have to do is probably think in terms of sort of a back door, right? If you try to full frontal assault Columbus, people are either going to agree or disagree, just how they're already predisposed to do so. But what you can do is you can talk about how Europeans that come over to the New World, how they cannot survive without Native American assistance, that their technology and their culture, these things aren't enough to actually recreate Europe. They can't do it. We can talk about the incredible diversity of Native culture in the New World at the time. We can even do little shifts like point out that 1/5 of the world's population at the time lived in North and South America, and what does that do for the discovery narrative? And so I think pragmatically we just have to sort of challenge and chip away as opposed to a frontal assault. At least that's where I've been successful. And I mean that. I don't like that, right? Because I'd rather just deal with the bullshit and be done. But that doesn't work. And so, yeah, I think you have to find ways to sort of challenge the underpinnings of the narrative of discovery and savagery and religion and all these other things that kind of make this story seem noble, until you realize that after the arrival of Columbus, within 100 years, 90% of the New World population is dead, not just from disease, but from warfare, from slavery, from displacement, from forced relocation. And if we can tell that sort of story, then I think it makes the Columbus narrative untenable.
Now, what do you say to people that, and then this is kind of one of those PragerU narratives, since we were joking about that earlier,
sure,
where they say that the Native people were kind of inherently savage. You have movies like Apocalypto,
sure,
that show human sacrifice, and it's like, well, look, these people were savages that were, if not being cannibals, they were definitely killing each other. It's not like they were all sitting there kumbayaing and then a bunch of Europeans arrived.
Sure.
So what do you say to that narrative?
So there's a couple different things you can say there, right? One, you can say is stop watching PragerU. That's just first advice. But there's a couple of things, right? So there are at the time of the encounter between Europeans and indigenous peoples in the New World, there's literally hundreds, maybe even thousands of different societies. So you can't say like the Aztecs and their sacrificial system are a stand-in, right, for all of North and South America. It doesn't work. It's lazy and it's quite frankly sort of racist. You can then ask them if they can describe anything about medieval European society at all, if they can explain why life expectancies are actually better in the New World. And then you can do things, and I hesitate to do this, right, because you could do things that say like that Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, is actually like larger than Paris or Madrid or London at the time. But I hesitate to do that because then what it does is it kind of concedes a certain definition of civilization, right? That I don't think ultimately is helpful in the end. And then finally, you know, what you can do is sort of challenge them to think in terms of what would an unmolested indigenous civilization or an unmolested West African civilization, what would they accomplish by the 21st century, if not disrupted and in times destroyed by European interference, right? Because part of this is sort of this unspoken counterfactual that 1492 was as advanced as Native Americans were ever going to get. And so you have two choices: live in 1492 Native American or 2023 United States. Which one is better? Admit you'd rather live in 2023 United States. And yeah, I would. I like indoor plumbing and pizza, so I am all about it. Right? But we never asked the question, what would it mean to live in 2023 North America or 2023 West Africa? Right? So yeah, I feel like I haven't been incoherent. I'm on some medication. I'm gonna be real honest with you.
No.
I feel like this is very eloquent, and I'm going to tell this story a certain way. My narrative of this live performance will be quite flattering.
Toussaint,
would you like to add anything to that?
Well, I wanted to kind of talk more about the horrors, I guess. As is the title of the show. What can you tell us about any enslavement and terrorizing of indigenous people, the forced conversion of Native peoples to Christianity, and the introduction of a host of new diseases?
And I also think that really goes with the last question as well, too, because that's one of the things that I see in right-wing circles is like the horrors of society, of Native society before European intervention. So yeah, I'd love that. Riff.
All right, let's see. all the fun topics in one question, man. This is
We don't want to fetishize the horrors or anything, but the story just needs to be told, you know.
Yeah, and I think it's very valuable to ask, and right, I think there's actually value in trying to understand the mindset that can justify that, right? Because that's why I think we learn the lessons from history is not just recounting the horrors of the past, but trying to understand how could a human being look at that and say, yeah, I'm cool with that. So to understand Columbus especially, right, you've got to understand the story of the Reconquista back in the Iberian Peninsula, right? So by 1492, it's not really Spain technically. What will become Spain has finally kicked out the last Moorish kingdom. They control the peninsula along with Portugal, right? It's 1492. There's soldiers reporting visions of St. James riding on a horse, helping them to destroy Granada and take it over. And so right in the same year that it seems like God has delivered them from the Islamic threat in the Iberian Peninsula, all of a sudden, from their perspective, God gives them an entire new world to explore, to conquer, and to convert. And in fact, a lot of Spanish Franciscans conclude this is actually the end of history, right? In a positive sense, right? These are the last peoples. We convert them. It's over. Jesus comes back. We did it. We kicked ass. So they go and basically show up. And it's almost comical if it wasn't true. You show up and you read a document in Spanish that says, by the way, FYI, you're now Spanish subjects. And they're like, what the hell's that guy saying? Who knows? But now you have the legal precedent of saying, well, you are Spanish subjects. And so to resist is to commit rebellion against the king. And rebellion can be met very, very severely by torture, by enslavement, by really anything, right? And the king owns your gold now and that sort of thing. And oh, by the way, this priest is going to have you guys walk into a lake, dip your heads underwater, and now you're Christian. The medieval Catholic Church put much more emphasis on the efficacy of the church's ceremonies than an actual individual's response to them. So from the church's perspective, these are now baptized Christians. So if you do things like enjoy sex too much, right, or whatever, you're now a heretic, right? So now both the crown and the church can, and for the sake of your soul, must punish you. And so that those political and religious rights undergird, in the Spanish sector at least, where Columbus kind of kicks things off, undergird the kind of brutality and justify the enslavement and the rape and all these terrible, terrible things that we see. And in the French and the English sector, you have variations upon a theme there. But yeah, so some of you hear in K through 12, you hear like God, glory, gold. Those are the 3 reasons they came over. It's a little simplistic, but not that much.
What do you think about guns, germs, and steel?
I think there's a helpful kernel there. I appreciate what the book tries to accomplish, and it's trying to show that inherent racial or cultural diversity or superiority aren't what explain the victory of Europe. I still think it ends up being too simplistic and deterministic in the end. So I appreciate the effort. I think there's better stuff out there.
There's like 500 pages to say that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got to cover guns, germs, and steel, Jason. You can't do that. I mean, if it was just guns, you just do the Second Amendment and you'd be done. But
I mean, that's a book that for a lot of people, I should say, I don't know how many people read all. I think it is like 500 pages.
It's big.
More people probably watched the little documentary series on it than actually watched it. And I feel very comfortable saying I'm sure more people watched it passively in the background while they did other things, and kind
like
of got
enjoying sex too much.
Exactly, they're being heretics.
First against the wall. That's the rule.
Is that a better narrative than the one if you have a kid, again, a K through 12 kid that's getting the Columbus discovery narrative, and then they watch the Guns, Germs, and Steel documentary? Is that better, or is it just a little bit more of the same thing?
It's better.
Mhm.
So I'm not going to. I mean, to get all the kinds of things in the chat going, I would say Guns, Germs, and Steel is better than the nationalistic origin story in the same way that 1619 is better than 1776 Project. But it doesn't mean I would endorse 1619 fully either.
Ooh.
Just get people stirred up for the champagne room later.
Ooh.
That is.
For a long time, we wouldn't mention 1619 on the show for fear of it bringing back the that person who shall remain nameless.
That's
A
right.
troll.
I'm just trying to get Pascal to jump on as a guest. Try to lure him out of the woodwork.
He's at a disco in Florida right now. Listen,
Man, talk about Clement Exchange right there.
At a Haitian restaurant eating patties. Did you watch Guns, Germs, and Steel, Toussaint?
I did watch it.
What did you think?
I concur with Dr. Graham. I like the phrase "helpful colonel." That that came across to me, but it was very focused on the author, and he took things very personally. He cried in it, and it was like, well, I don't really need that. I don't really need that. That doesn't, necessarily do anything for me.
He cried about
Never doubt the power of white tears to bring change.
Exactly. He cried.
Hey, you've never seen a manager get fired at a Starbucks then. You've never seen how many school board meetings have you not gone to? That's the better question.
I can't remember most of them, probably trauma and blackouts.
Oh yeah, because there's some white tears at the school. And that's when my daughter learned the gay agenda.
That's right.
Now she's listening to
They taught her about Homo sapiens in science class.
What is this monkey business?
Trying to tell me I was a Homo sapien. His daddy's a Homo sapien. Hell is going on? What are you teaching these kids at this school?
That monkey fell out of a tree and he stood up.
Monkeys? Is that how it works?
I watched the History Channel. I understand Hitler.
That's
right. I understand Hitler.
All of history is either Hitler or aliens. There's really nothing else that drives human history. Ancient aliens or modern assholes.
About
those
aliens.
Are the two groups.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
And anything else you do. Yeah, I don't know why you're talking Columbus. Just leave him alone. I like salami.
It does.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, please.
It does make me sad, the Italian attachment to Columbus.
I didn't know they cared. I'm like, you guys got The Godfather.
Well, the reason they care dates back to the 19th century, right? Where there were good and bad types of white, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Irish take a while to become white, so the Italians, so the Jewish people, so do the Polish people, right? It takes a while. And so Columbus, because he's so central to this narrative of American nationalism, which at the time is tied to white supremacy, they see that's kind of their ticket, right? Oh, you guys like Columbus? Did you know he is Italian? So you're welcome, first of all. Second of all, can we vote and work here?
You know, Columbus, he was a paisan. He was one of us. Do you think we're going to get hate mail from the Italian contingent, Toussaint?
The Anti-Defamation League? Yes.
You get a knock on my door. Say, is that Luca Brasi? Hey, you the mooly over there making the Italian jokes. Dale. All of a sudden, the intro is Sha-na-na.
My God.
8 old people got that joke. That's okay.
If you say so.
He didn't say cool people. He said old people. It's fine.
All the old people that
All
listen
the
to the
old
podcast.
all the old people just like fell out. And the kids are like, what's so funny? Yeah, don't try to show your kids Sha Na Na. They just won't get it. John, what do you think is the biggest misconception about Columbus?
Well, I think one of the big ones right off the bat is it's still pretty popular to think that Columbus believed the world was round
Mhm.
and everyone else thought it was flat. And that's why he didn't, that's why no one would support him, because they were wrong. I even had a textbook I used at a previous college where it said that Columbus had the courage to believe the experts were wrong, which, if that doesn't make you an American. But medication.
Oh shit.
So the problem is that Columbus is a pretty decent sailor from all accounts, but he's a terrible cartographer. What he doesn't realize is that he is literally thousands and thousands and thousands of miles off in his estimations of the world's circumference. So no other court will pay him, because all their experts are like, we don't have ships that could possibly make this journey. And they're right?
Mm.
Columbus should have died at sea, but he happened to crash land in the Caribbean. And so the reason that Ferdinand and Isabella do support him is not because they're like more forward thinking. It's because they're quite frankly desperate. They finally have a kingdom. They're trying to catch up with other European powers at the time. And Columbus represents really a low risk, high reward situation. If he happens to be right, then you've got a path to the Indies, right, to Asia, that Portugal doesn't know about. And if he's wrong, you're out 3 ships and like 100 convicts, right? So what are you going to do? Got to break a few eggs to make a conquest.
Oh.
Yeah, so that one, I still have a surprising amount of students in my classes, even in college, who are like, oh, I didn't realize that. I'm like, yeah, no, the whole world wasn't stupid except Columbus. That's not how any of this works.
What if it was? How smug was he then? Was he even more smug than you tried to say in the beginning of the show? Like,
yeah, well,
you think it's flat?
From what we can tell, I mean, it's hard to know for sure. It seems like he dies never conceding he did not find Asia. And there's some things in those journals where you could read some things a certain way, but it seems like to the end, he's like, I did it. And you're welcome. And now I'm going to beat up everybody because I did it. Me and my guns think that your gold-looking women look really good. So just saying.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's kind of every mafia movie I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Is he the first gangster then?
Columbus, the first gangster.
Is it Columbus import?
I kind of think that Genghis Khan is the first gangster, but that's okay. Just me.
That's fair. That's fair. But the
Columbus
Columbus
you got there, be ashamed something happened to it, things like that.
Toussaint, is that your house?
No, I'm sorry.
That's your TV?
No, it's sirens outside.
So it is your house.
Italian Americans are coming for Toussaint.
Yeah. Toussaint, are the
Get out of the house.
Are the calls coming from inside the house?
It's not my house making the noise.
Well, I didn't think your house throws its voice like Michael Winslow from the Police Academy movies. I figured it was outside of your house.
Look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's a busy neighborhood.
We've had a Police Academy reference and a Sha Na Na reference. What will be the trifecta on this Gen X comedy roundtable?
My concern is as the podcast goes sort of highbrow that we're going to lose a lot of listeners.
We'll blame the shirt.
Yeah, don't forget your roots, Polo Man.
Kowalski says Columbus was 1490s Trump. I discovered it.
it works on a couple of levels.
It does.
We did actually have questions prepared for you. That I will say Toussaint, actually. Do you want to read question number 5? You want me to read it?
I'll do 5.
Oh, you go for it.
Okay.
Go for it, baby.
Giving thanks and celebrating the harvest and changing seasons are also part of Indigenous culture, which was surprising to find, but also logical. What do you think is the biggest misconception about Thanksgiving? The first one.
I think the biggest misconception is really a lie by omission. Because we kind of end the story with Native Americans and pilgrims sitting around being happy. And then we kind of fade to black.
Right.
And then it's 2023. And who knows what happened, right? But within a decade, less than a decade, the pilgrims and other Puritans who arrived later are already at war with the descendants of Squanto, right? And those who are alive at the first Thanksgiving, and do some pretty brutal, ugly, horrible stuff, right? So again, it's not that the meal didn't happen, but it's that we sort of pause and tell everybody to leave the theater right then instead of going, right? So that allows the story to represent a narrative that it absolutely can't support, right? And related to that, if you want a story about poor, cold, starving Europeans arriving, only being saved by Native Americans, that's actually the story of Jamestown a couple of decades earlier. That we don't memorialize Jamestown. There's no 1607 project, right? Because the Pilgrims.
Can we call for more white people to call for the 1607 project? Like, what do we have to do to create the 1607 project?
I don't know. Let's get Disney to make a Pocahontas 3, and I think that will just the cultural capital we need to move forward with this plan. But
do you know how
the
much
Pilgrims
money?
are a sanitized story based in religion that has a very neat and convenient place you can pause the film, and I think that's the biggest misconception about it, off the top of my head.
So it's not a potluck.
Well, it might have been a potluck in some sense.
Jesus.
But who knows,
All the pictures I had to color were of a potluck.
That's right.
Now the real question is, as a young black child, were you an Indian or a pilgrim?
Like in life?
No, not in life, like in the dress up in elementary school.
Oh, we didn't do plays like that. The
man.
only school play I can remember was in the 4th grade, and I was Wild Bill Hickok.
Wow.
Of course, did you grow up in California, Jason?
Yep, I'm a California.
Okay, so you had the mission Indian narrative bullshit to deal with. You didn't have time for Thanksgiving. You had the California missions to deal with. Yeah.
All my kids too. Yeah.
In Texas, we don't have those kind of problems, so it's fine.
You're a cowboy.
We just have the Alamo, the greatest story of freedom the world has ever known.
I lost my
Or
red
else
beanie.
John Wayne wouldn't be in it. So
I lost my red
think
beanie at the Alamo. I hate the Alamo.
Prairie Fire Kowalski from Nebraska says, the 1607 project is coming. I'll talk to the whites. Whites.
If I'm not mistaken, Kowalski lives in Nebraska, and that's where whites come from, as far as I'm concerned.
Nebraska.
Whites are bred there. They're bred very large in Nebraska. Sure. There's a small sliver of it where they let a few Negroes in.
They eat corn. I know that.
They
feed them some corn.
They eat a lot of stuff in Nebraska.
Isn't Nebraska a Native American word?
Is it?
So. Yeah, I think so. I don't remember.
The first college football Saturday I've ever experienced, like in a college football town, was in Lincoln, Nebraska, when Dominic and Sue was still playing for the Cornhuskers. That was the most insane Saturday I've ever seen.
That was a large, angry man. I'm not gonna lie. If he played hockey, he would have had about a 2-game career. So I mean, he totally was on topic, but
very friendly around town.
Well, good. That's good.
Prester John asked Toussaint who exterminated Jason's upper buttons.
These are the questions.
I believe the answer is global capitalism. But we can do a poll in the champagne room, see what people think.
It's again, when I saw in Dominic, first of all, people look bigger in pads. He's a large cat, but he didn't. He was as big as I thought. Really friendly. Really friendly. I was kind of shocked. President Joe Biden formally recognized Indigenous Peoples Day as a national holiday in 2021. What do you think efforts to reclaim Columbus Day by replacing it with? What do you think of efforts? I'm so sorry. To reclaim Columbus Day by replacing it with Indigenous Peoples Day. Indigenous Peoples Day. Is this a move in the right direction for us, or what does it mean to change a holiday's name? I know a lot of people are kind of married to holidays, much like people are married to sports teams, right? There's people that will never call the Washington Commanders the Commanders, the Cleveland Guardians the Guardians. Are people married to holidays like that as well?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of a good metaphor. So to me, changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day is like pouring baking soda on a grease fire. Like, that's great, but you still have to make dinner, right? And I think that's really where it breaks down, because it replaces sort of it can replace the sort of generic, vicious savage with sort of generic noble savage, right? It erases Indigenous people by placing them all in one huge lumped category. It's like us saying, let's celebrate your Asian People Day. You're like, wow, who the hell are we celebrating, right? So it provides opportunities for tribal nations to do local education. It provides opportunities for those who are interested to learn about local and regional Indigenous history. So in that sense, it can be helpful. But I'm going to stand by my weird metaphor about putting baking soda on a grease fire. It's like you haven't accomplished anything. You just kept the kitchen from burning down. You haven't actually done anything productive yet. And so I think, it provides opportunities that can be used well. But knowing the laziness of white allies may not accomplish as much as we hope.
No, do you know anything about Canadian Thanksgiving?
I don't know much about it other than it sort of seems to fill the same generic meaning, right? As American Thanksgiving, and they both come out of that sort of European harvest festival, right, tradition. And then I think they kind of intermix a little bit, especially as British loyalists flee to Canada during the Revolution, right, kind of brings those traditions with them. But as far as like specifics of that holiday versus the U.S. version, I don't know a whole lot.
All I know is that it happened first.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, allegedly. I don't know. I wasn't there.
Pascal was.
I don't have a Bill and Ted time machine to take me back to, that moment.
Pascal's an older gentleman.
I'm so mad you always say, Pascal, you're at the first Thanksgiving. You know what's sad? He called me this morning and goes, hey, need me on the show today? I was like, oh, no, you're fine. I'm just going to talk shit about you while you're not watching it. Don't worry, you don't watch these episodes. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Now when he hosts when I'm gone, he's just going to rip me apart. And it'll be fair. It'll be fair. John, you're in academia. How do you feel? We said this a little bit earlier, I think off air. Sure. How do you feel about land acknowledgements?
Yeah, so I think land acknowledgements in a similar way can provide opportunities, right? I think for opportunities to learn local and regional history. They can provide opportunities for universities that are, especially land grant universities, to work with local tribal nations. but they can also just be entirely performative, right? A little hand wringing, saying we're sad and we're done. Where it's done well, it's followed up by real action, right? I've actually seen some local universities, on land grant universities, do things like invite or incorporate rather Indigenous knowledge into, like, science departments.
Ooh.
Provide scholarships, right, for Indigenous students, things like that, right? So where I see action to rectify a wrong that goes beyond hand wringing, I think there's value there. But if I'm just putting in my email signature, oh, by the way, these tribal nations used to live here and now they don't, and we're really sad about it. Anyway, let's talk about Columbus. Right? And I don't know, right? I mean, this is the problem, right? Is Indigenous Peoples Day, land grant, these all can be meaninglessly performative, or they can provide opportunities for really meaningful conversation, education, and even change. It just depends on how they're used, I guess.
I mean, I feel like they're used to kind of redress whatever sort of harm you want to redress by acknowledging, especially in Canada. There's so much acknowledging in Canada.
Yes, they're very sorry about the past.
They love saying sorry. What'd you say?
Australia too.
Those are places that learn the whole like sorry thing, and the world sees that and they go, man, only if America did that. It's like, so what? Give a damn about a sorry? Like,
Right.
if you ever spent time in Canada, if you ever spent time in places like Australia where the native populations fill the prisons, super high unemployment. Like, we always talk about disproportionate numbers with Black people. You never hear people talk about disproportionate numbers with natives because those numbers are astronomical. When it comes to incarceration, police violence, spousal abuse, poverty,
trafficking, right?
Ooh. There was a whole hashtag that people cared about for 5 minutes and acted like it went away and acted like the hashtag was new. When I was working in North Dakota, we weren't hashtagging anything, but there were so many articles in the local paper about missing young children. You want to talk about a population nobody cares about? There's one, and you can acknowledge that you don't care about them. I feel like with a land acknowledgement.
Yeah, it also can be used to freeze Native American peoples in the past, right? We're sorry about people who existed, and damn, it's just what happened to them, right? But it freezes them in the past, culturally, historically. I mean that, right? This was kind of one of the reasons that the book "Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee" isn't that popular among Indigenous activists, is because it's this kind of this sorry tale of tragedy that ends in 1890, and they're like, we're still here. Like, if you really were moved to help a Native American, great news. Still plenty of cancer. And might I add, Jason, I'm sorry about slavery. Want to say it here publicly. I want to take that risk.
You're very brave.
Very brave.
Thank you. I appreciate you telling me that. I need to hear that.
You're very brave. That's what you need. You need to do a land acknowledgement and have a Native person put their arm on your shoulder and say you're very brave.
That's right.
And then you need to say that they're the natural stewards of the land.
That's right.
And then they go, but I don't know how to garden. And you're like, it's okay. It's just in your blood.
It's fine. Your people have been doing this for a long time. My people never wore this. I saw on a football game. I know you did.
Yeah.
Just because you've lost your cultures, I mean, I don't know what it is.
Well, let me ask you about the natural stewards of the land.
Because she's going there.
That's a popular thing to say in environmentalism. But it's hard to deny that some of the agricultural practices are just better than what we're doing now, I guess.
But do you think all Native people are the natural stewards of the land?
I guess natural stewards of the land is where it goes a little too far.
That's where I get offended by it, because then it becomes like this spiritual thing that every time a Native person speaks, then like magic's supposed to come out of their mouth.
I mean, just say children of the forest and be done with it, right? I mean,
right.
But then, like you get that's the same thing with like Black people speak with such a magical rhythm. It's like Brian Gumble. Like, we just got rhythm in our blood. Like, word? You ever seen black people that can't? I have.
Like Flavor Flav, that natural
Natural rhythm.
So, I mean, what I would say is that in general, I mean, there's always been exceptions. In general, Native American cultures tended to see themselves as part of the natural order.
Mhm.
And therefore, they found value in experimenting and finding ways to live well with the natural resources around them. I mean, they were always successful, right? I mean, we could look at like, buffalo kills, right? Driving hundreds of animals off a cliff isn't being one with nature. But for the most part, they found equilibrium in many places prior to contact where it worked. Other places it doesn't, right? The Southwest is in horrible decline because they try to bring irrigation to the region, and it works for a while until drought just kind of kills the whole project. I think the main distinction to make is that the Europeans and their later descendants who are coming over here, right, they see nature as something to exercise dominion over, to conquer, right, to sort of impose one's will on, to exploit. And you don't see a lot of those concepts in Native American use of the land. They're still adapting the land, they're still changing the land, they're still cultivating crops, they're still doing all those things, but it's not with this sense of divine stewardship that leads to dominion. It's more of a divine stewardship that leads to responsibility to maintain order, of which you are part, right? So in that sense, there's a market. It seems in very broad terms, there's a marked difference between sort of Western and Native understandings of nature and how humanity fits in with that. Even if we want to reject the sort of sitting around in a circle like Keebler elves or something, right, and living in trees, right, there still is something worth pointing out that explains why the last several hundred years have been so utterly destructive to the environment, whereas the thousands before that weren't.
Does that answer your question, Toussaint?
Yes, and that was very well said. Also, I concur.
Doctor, do you concur?
I do concur.
John, thank you so much for joining us. We are coming up on the hour. We're trying to be a little more responsible here at This Is Revolution and start shows on time and not start on rockstar time, as Toussaint calls it, or Axl Rose time, as she calls it. And we will be, excuse me, taking this conversation to the champagne room. We will be doing some of our usual champagne room shenanigans where I have found several videos that I need Toussaint, and John will be joining us. And as you've seen, John is equally as sharp and ridiculous. There's definitely some fun relationship videos. I also found some videos of white people cooking well. Right? Because we watch so many videos of bad cooking. So I had to show videos of white people not sucking when they cook. John is white and he cooks.
It's true. I can push microwave buttons with the best. There is no time I cannot set with my white will.
Someone says, test John Graham's allyship, Jason. First of all, Are You a White Ally game took a long time to prepare.
It did.
And I feel like it's only funny with Doug Lane because he's just so white.
So I'd like to point out, I apologize for slavery, and I don't appreciate being attacked and persecuted at this point. So I'm getting to the point where I'm getting hurt personally. That was not a point in my apology.
Look, we're going to start this whole video thing off in the champagne room with a bunch of your people, some white women talking about white men. And I need you guys to explain.
Hey, don't knock honky love till you've tried it, Jason. Hell yeah. Vanilla love is good, buddy. It's
Born Center says, "Are you a spicy white, John?" Does that mean to be Italian?
Well, I have family from Louisiana, so I don't know if that qualifies me as being spicy or not. But
you might be spicy white.
Okay, I will do I always do my best to be edgy and relevant.
White people from Louisiana is what changed my entire view of the world.
Telling you, a good cup of gumbo could heal the world.
I watched white people eat a watermelon. It's like, you guys really loved it, and they were looking at me like I was crazy. I was like, oh no. If I would have had a camera phone, that video would have went viral.
See those videos they give a fruit bat like a piece of watermelon? That's kind of how I imagine it.
It was like it's hot. It was a hot, just disgusting southern summer, and there's this massive watermelon, and there was a break the guys got to come down to the galley, and of course I cooked out there, and the head chef at the time said, "Jason, cut up that watermelon right now." And I was like, "Why?" He was like, "It's hot, and they're gonna come down here." I was like, "But they have a little salad bar; they'll be fine." And he's like, "No, cut it up now." And it was like stat. It was like one of those medical shows. What's going on? Where's the watermelon? quickly.
Sounds like The Walking Dead trying to avoid zombies or something.
So I cut this watermelon up, and he goes, "Just watch." And I put it out, and they run after it like dogs to a bone.
You have a white bird feeder, Jason. Big ol' obese hummingbirds coming in.
I didn't know. I didn't, because I'm from California. I don't like watermelon because whenever I would eat it, people, it's like the Dave Chappelle thing where he doesn't want to take the fried chicken on the plane. Like, that's how I have felt about watermelon my whole life. And then I lived with the white family for a while. They loved watermelon. And they would be like, "You sure you don't want to eat any?" And I was like, this is kind of like a scene from Get Out.
Or is it white allyship? That's the other possibility.
They just really like white people like watermelon, and people like black people. And I was like, I can take you to some places. And these white people that I lived with were in California, native Californians. They fucked watermelon. It's hot right now in the Bay Area. If I go to their house right now, I should do an Instagram live from their house. They're eating a watermelon.
You make it sound like they eat with their feet.
They do not. They're very normal.
Like these are super country people.
No, they're not. They're not country at all. They're just regular cats that, let me stay in their house and my kids for a very long time. Born Center says Jason gonna let the whites bully him in the dehydration. Like, Toussaint, you've been black for a while, right? 28 years.
28 alleged years.
28 alleged years. Have you ever had a watermelon and you're around? Because you went to that fancy white high school. Have you ever?
It was multiracial.
That's what all people say that went to white high schools.
No.
Yeah, I had 2 black students in my high school also. It was definitely
Toussaint, you were the diversity hire.
That's right.
No.
It was you. Look, I watched Fame. It was you and a bunch of dancing Puerto Ricans. I knew what was going on at the high school.
Dancing Puerto Ricans.
When you were at the dance in high school and you pulled out a watermelon, did you feel like people were looking at you different?
I do not like watermelon.
Conveniently,
I don't like watermelon. I told my sister that, and she's like, "You don't like watermelon? That's because you be eating the green part." I'm like, "No, I don't eat the green part."
Prairie Fire says watermelon and mustard advance white people food. That is, as we would say in the South, some Yankee bullshit. I don't fall in line with a lot of those tropes, that white on white hate that you people have, but tater tot hot dish, mustard on a watermelon, sugar in your grits. It's unacceptable for me. John Graham, you are a Southerner. Sugar in your grits.
No.
Would you slap the bowl out of somebody's hand?
First of all, I'm a good person, so no. The only thing you need in this for Southern food is cream gravy. If cream gravy can't salvage it, it can't be salvaged. That's none of sugar and mustard nonsense. Gravy or nothing.
There's another thing, Tucson, about the South. There's different kinds of white people that like different kinds of gravy. And these boys took me aside one day. I was like, look here, check this out. They're like, we from Mississippi. And if we don't got white gravy out there, we really not gonna eat nothing.
White gravy.
We gonna leave in 2 weeks. Them other boys coming. They like that brown gravy. We need that white gravy. I was like, okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Got you covered.
Yeah, I got that. Thank you.
Brown gravy is carpetbagger gravy. We don't.
Carpetbagger gravy.
Sitting and said, people so white. They need white.
Right.
The last thing I'll say about those Mississippi dudes. Here's a football story for you, John. Steve McNair died while I was in the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh,
if you remember that. And he's from Mississippi. And those dudes were in tears over Steve McNair. And I just yelled out, but what about Brett Favre? Like trying to be a dick. What about Brett Favre?
Nice.
They hated him. Hated Brett Favre. And this is, of course, way before the whole scandal with him, taking off.
Before they had justifiable reason. Yeah.
Oh, they said he was a piece of shit. They loved Steve McNair. They said Steve McNair was like the nicest guy.
That was a horrible
crazy.
tragedy for the sport and for the world, losing him like that.
Choosing
not Brett Favre, to be clear.
Choosing a gravy is ethno-national. All right, we're gonna go to the champagne room. I want to know, what kind of gravy do you people like? Leave it in the comments. There's a lot of Canadians that watch this show. Your people's Thanksgiving is coming, or whatever you want to call it. Do you celebrate any? Let's end with this question. Do you celebrate any sort of Thanksgiving like holiday, John, at your home?
Yeah. Ironically, as a Texan, I am obligated to culturally appropriate Mexican food for Thanksgiving. So we tend to have fajitas as some sort of misguided way of showing I'm not part of the system by just imperializing a different part of the system.
Turkey.
So that's kind of what we do.
Gross ass turkey quesadilla.
Turkey quesadilla. Oh my gosh.
No, that's wrong. That's there's nothing good about that.
Toussaint, do you celebrate Thanksgiving?
I do not, but I would like to make a statement about Thanksgiving.
Ooh, you know what? Let's give you the floor here, Miss Thang.
Okay. I'm big. As a vegetarian, I would like to say that I hear complaints about turkey being too dry and not cool and not something that people want to eat for Thanksgiving. Maybe they'll have like a bite or here or there. If you don't like turkey, don't have the turkey. It's really just that simple, people. Let the turkey live. Don't have the turkey if you don't like it.
Do you eat stuffing?
No.
Do you eat macaroni and cheese?
I do eat macaroni and cheese.
Is it gross ass vegan cheese?
No.
You can eat regular cheese?
I'll eat regular cheese. I'll break kayfabe for some real
regular cheese.
Real cheese.
Will you have the same episode that I had recently with the carrot and prune salad?
Oh my gosh. No, I will not. I can handle my digestive system pretty well at this point as a vegetarian.
I believe you people are all full of shit because I was trying to be like you and eat this salad and it destroyed me. So turkey is the way.
Green bean casserole and cornbread casserole. I don't even need turkey. If I have those two things, I'm set.
Look at that.
What about macaroni and cheese?
Yeah, I'll eat it. I'm just saying, green bean casserole and cornbread casserole. And unfortunately, tragically,
you said cornbread casserole. We said cornbread dressing, but it's the same thing, right?
No. The cornbred casserole is a little bit different.
Okay.
It's made by the best version is made by Paula Deen. Do that what you will. It's still pretty good.
My grandma used to love Paula Deen, and she hated Rachel Ray. My grandma used to hate Rachel Ray. I was like, why do you hate this woman so much? She goes, she don't never wash her vegetables. Just nasty.
I assume they are washed first.
She could just be nasty.
I would believe it about Rachel Ray.
But yeah, my grandma used to love Paula Deen, and she died before the whole scandal came out, because that would have been a lot for her to take in.
I'm sure.
It was a lot for me to take in.
Paula Deen.
Because that's what we would do, especially when she got sick and she was kind of bedridden. I would sit there and watch Paula Deen with her.
Aww.
So when I had to hear that story about Paula Deen dressing,
that sucks.
She did the most.
like, who thinks that way?
Plantation Paula.
I've been around some real deal racist pieces of shit. I've been around Klan people that couldn't think to do that. You are on another level of comic book villain when that's how you think. This is a good idea.
I'd like to apologize for Paula Deen.
It's very brave of you.
Well, thank you guys. The link is already up for the champagne room. John, we're going to send you that link. Email you is the best way.
Perfect.
Email you the link. We'll be there. Give us about 10 minutes and we'll be there. And we are
out.